Just before we get started, I want to thank UCD for supporting the event, and particularly Beth and Amanda and Gráinne from the Irish Academy of Management for all their hard work in the background and the foreground in terms of helping us organise today. Before we get started, I know a lot of you are already aware of the Irish Academy of Management, and this is one of the awards that we've recently inaugurated. So this is the 5th one, and Susie is the 5th award winner. I've left some documentation here for the Irish Academy of Management strategy document for 2025-2030, and one of the key strategic priorities that we're looking at is to try and invigorate our strategic interest groups. So we're going to put a call out shortly if anybody is interested in initiating a SIG that would have an alignment with the Irish Academy of Management and would create an Irish group within a particular discipline area that would build some capacity, and hopefully there'd be opportunities to collaborate with BAM as well, because that's something that we're strategically working with BAM on. So feel free to take a leaflet and keep an eye out for the call for the SIGs, or feel free, if you're interested, if you want more information, to drop me an email. So I'm aware that we have a tight timeline, and with two Germans here behind me. Sorry for my for my cultural generalisation there, but Nicole did tell me she was going to stick to the time. So as I said, I'm delighted that we're going to award Susie the 2025 Irish Academy of Management Distinguished International Scholar Award. So I'm going to let Nicole give you a full background of all of Susie's achievements, and I think it can go on for a while, but I think she's going to try and shorten it. So thanks very much, everybody, for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the event.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. So for many of you might already know Susie, and if you don't, I introduce her to you. So Susie is the first Irish-based scholar to actually win this prestigious award, and not just, it's an international award, as you can see, not just because she's German, by now she's probably more Irish, but because her research has really created an international impact and had a ripple effect on the international scale. So also her research is on complex markets such as digital and pharmaceutical markets, and it's truly groundbreaking. So if you want to look up her publication record, it's really impressive. Her work has certainly managed to bridge the world of business, ethics and social responsibility. It is really fair to describe her as a research superstar. Over 10 million in research grants, including a 2 million ERC Consolidator Grant. She has published in more than 80 international peer-reviewed journals, many of them FT50s, of course. And she has released numerous books, including Concerned Markets, also healthcare activism, and also the forthcoming Peak Pharma book. And the 11th of December should be a special day if you want to put something into your advent calendar, because that's when the book is going to be released. So a totally shameless plug. Of course, there's much more to Susie. She also engages a lot in activism or academic activism. So, for example, she was quite instrumental in the Access to Medicines movement. She works with Access to Medicines in Ireland. She's also been staged outside the door before holding placards. So it's not just all talk, a lot of activism too, practical. And she's also a member of the World Health Organization's Technical Advisory Group on Pharmaceutical Pricing Policies, which is a huge achievement. And of course, recently she was also appointed an ERC Ambassador for Ireland. And of course, beyond that, Susie is not just a prolific academic and an academic activist, but she is also a terrific and tireless mentor, a co-author, a supporter, a colleague, and a very loyal friend. Not just for me, but also for many others who are sitting in this room here too. And as a package, Susie is certainly living proof how socially and personally engaged research can foster care, morality, and social impact. So I think for that, she deserves a round of applause. And of course, a very pretty looking award. Congratulations, Susie. Huge congratulations. Now, so we are here today to honor Susi's achievements and present her with this very attractive looking award, of course, but also chat with her about the idea of enacting an ethics of care in academic research. So without further ado, I think we might grab a seat, and I have a few questions prepared for us. Now, for our fireside chat. Put the fire on.
Yeah. Anyone has a YouTube?
Maybe not today. Okay, Susi, so tell us a little bit about your most recent research and what achievements you're most proud of.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Is that mic working? Okay. So my most recent big research project was called Misfires. It was a research project that was funded through the European Research Council to the tune of 2 million, so big research project. And what Misfires set out to do was to study market failures in healthcare markets and specifically pharmaceutical markets. In terms of market failures, healthcare markets are sort of the present that keep on giving because there's always new failures, pricing, patenting, access to medicines, etc. And what we set out to do in Misfires really with a research team of 6 was from the perspective of patient groups and access to medicines activists, so the underdogs in that market, so to speak, to look at how they perceive these market failures, where they see the markets to fail, and how they voice these failures and bring them back into the market for the market to hopefully get better over time. So that was a fun project, 6 years and over 6 cases. Achievements, well, first of all, obviously publications. We got more than 40 journal publications out of that project, a lot of them FT50. 4 books, 3 books, 4 books, depending how you count, with 1 monograph coming out now, which is sort of the end point of the project. But so that was great. But really, I see the publications as a means to an end. We often, I think, in academia, we think of our publications as the end product, but it doesn't stop there because publications are behind paywalls. And, you know, when you're lucky, then, you know, you get 40 sites in 3 years and you go, yay. But so what are they a means for, then becomes the question. So on the one hand, they're means for building careers. And I'm really proud of that fact that Misfires has built academic careers, and a couple of the people who were involved in Misfires are in this room. So everybody who was involved in Misfires came out with really good publications, got a job, got their own independent research grants. Ilaria, for instance, who's there, who's on an SFI pathway grant now with me. And these people take the spirit of Misfires onwards and multiply it in their own ways, and that's really something very wonderful. The other achievement, I think, of Misfires is that I got very heavily involved in policy. So you mentioned the WHO Technical Advisory Group, and that's a way to really bring that insight that Misfires afforded me to life, and it's a group that is very active and that just essentially looks at how we can make pharmaceutical markets more sustainable for everybody and open up access to medicines. Yeah, and then there's, of course, my, you know, standing in front of the doll with placards kind of existence as an access to medicines activist as well, and that has been really, really rewarding for me as well. It's a European activist movement, and again, with a lot of clever people, and I learned so much of them. So, yeah, that sums it up, I think.
Very commendable achievements for sure. So tell me, what does an ethics of care mean for you, and how do you make it come to life on your everyday basis, on your everyday work?
Yeah, so I won't bore you with all the references and theories around ethics of care. Ethics of care came from feminist theorizing, really, and started way back in the 1980s with Carol Gilligan's and other people's writings, and then Joan Tronto took it into sort of political science and democracy, and Maria Puig de la Bella Casa and other people have written wonderful, wonderful things in the ethics of care. But what it boils down to me, essentially, Nicole, is a deep respect for everybody's humanity and connecting to other people through that common humanity. And if you start research on this basis, I think a lot of things change, how you engage in research, how you look at research, what you hope your research will accomplish. So for me personally, my ethics of care starts at the very beginning with what I research. I traveled quite a path from an early PhD that happened to be in sales because Guinness paid me a scholarship, and you can't say no to Guinness, surely. And I published in that, and that kept me afloat for a few years, but I wasn't passionate about that. Now, nothing against people who research sales, it's needed, but I just wasn't, I didn't care enough about sales performance to continue that. So I kind of retrained myself in sociology and science and technology studies and learned about patent law and learned about other things, because the one thing that I was really passionate about was access to medicines. So that became a driving force, and because I was passionate about that, I cared about that topic, it opened up so many doors for me in so many ways to research this issue. And then the second thing, so passion for the topic that you're researching, I think is really important. The second thing then is putting your research participants at the very center of everything you do. So thinking about what you can do to benefit your research participants, not just extract data from them, not just sort of hit and run, but really to see what that research can do to your participants, for your participants. And then that takes really different incarnations, because I give you two examples from misfires, and I see Angali is here in the audience. So with Angali, who came into misfires first as a research assistant actually, and then as a PhD student, Angali and I researched HIV prophylaxis rollout in Kenya and in Ireland. And as part especially of the Kenyan field work, Angali and I sat down and with the help of our Kenyan collaborators designed quite a substantive benefit sharing package that would allow to bring the research back to Kenya, to train people, research assistants in Kenya, to have ongoing collaborations, again, because the HIV population is such a heavily researched population, but they don't a lot of the time see people come back and give back who've taken their data, so to speak. In another project in Misfires, it was a project about people who live with ME/CFS. So that's chronic fatigue syndrome. It's a really, really difficult, really debilitating disease to live with. And it's one of these illnesses that are very difficult to understand if you don't live it, or if you don't have someone very close to you who lives with it. So we were working with this community, and we did interviews with recovery coaches, etc. And that was all great, but there was something missing. Because again, these people have very little energy, and we were asking them to do interviews which, took energy away from them, and that just didn't sit well with us. So at the end of the day, what we did was we created an art project. We invited participants to engage in an art project with us, and the objective of that project was to try to help them communicate what it is to live with this illness to other people who, like us, wouldn't understand it. So we had great fun. I mean, one participant knitted a really, really long scarf and, knitted the colors that sort of her energy levels every day into that scarf. And another worked with photographs. So she took photographs of her feet standing on different surfaces, and surfaces obviously because she was housebound, repeated over the course of the month that she did that. So really fantastic art objects, and we ended up with an exhibition, curating an exhibition on this. So that's the kind of thing that I think we as researchers can give back and really bring our research not just to life, but also bring it to life for the participants that we have. And then, from there you can take the ethics of care into your collaborations, for instance. So making sure that the people who you work with are cared for as well. And we did interviews during COVID, for instance, and I lost my own mum during COVID. So when I interviewed other people about their COVID experiences, it was sometimes hard to take what you heard. And that was equally true for the collaborators in this project. So we devised a way to to self-care, but also to take care of the other team members, to make sure that they're okay going through this interview process. And there's actually now a really interesting new initiative in UCD about trauma-sensitive research. So people who are involved in research that can recreate trauma in yourself, how we can take care of those researchers. So that's the kind of ethics of care. Again, it's not rocket science. It's this respect for humanity that we all have, and just design your entire research around that.
In fairness, I'm probably one of these examples of ethics of care sitting right beside you. Like, I've known Susi since 2008 when I was in my PhD. So that's a long time, and we're still working and publishing together quite happily. So again, many times she's given me career advice or kind of, helped me out with research and worked together with me so quite well on a personal and of course professional level too. So, I'm definitely one of these examples of people you've brought along too. So thank you for that. And of course, the art exhibition I've also seen, and it was truly amazing. Yeah. It was nice also to see something else coming out of one of these ERC projects that is not publications, to see a totally different output that's a bit more tangible and enjoyable too than publications too. Another question I would have for you is, how can scholars, let's say early career scholars, but maybe also scholars from other fields that are maybe more advanced, implement an ethics of care into their research work and academic career? How can they do that? What can you recommend to them?
So I think you start with passion. I think we're so amazingly privileged. We're working hard, no doubt about that, but we're privileged in the sense that we wake up every morning and we can decide what we're curious about today. And that is immense if you think about it. So that energy that you have, directing that towards the things that you care about, and whatever that is, in business or in other disciplines, I think that really is the first step for me. But then also think about your research projects from the end point. So what do you want to get? What do you want to achieve with the project? And yeah, of course, publications, I'm not naive, we all need them. Again, they build careers, but also what can the research achieve otherwise? For communities, for policy, for businesses, for small, medium-sized enterprises who might be struggling, etc., for other organizations. So if you start with that end goal and roll everything up, design your entire project to reach that end goal, I think that's the way I would think about research projects now. And then again, just make it participant-centric. So there's various different ways in bringing participants in from the start into your research design. The ethics application, I was talking a couple of people in my qualitative research methods course for PhD students are here in the room, and we were talking about the ethics application. And for a lot of people, it's a tick-boxing exercise, and that's okay, it's important. But I always encourage my PhD students to look at an ethics application as a way to improve your ethical sensitivities and sensibilities, and to communicate with the committee about a way of conceiving a research project in the most ethical way, and not just sort of doing the floor, just aim for the ceiling and really try to think about the research in the most encompassingly ethical way you can. So that is another advice that I would give to young scholars, But I think that passion for the things that you research, that will get you a very long way, and that will also eventually get you really good publications, actually.
That's very true, because most of the things you pick up are very interesting then. And in fairness, I think even the academic world is moving a little bit with the DORA principles towards, of course, publications matter, but also other outputs matter.
Yeah.
So I think there is actually a bit of a movement there, which is good too. And I think as scholars, we can also track our impact on overtone, I think, to see if it is being cited and where it's being cited beyond just the academic network by itself. So good stuff. And tell me, I heard a criticism once that, this kind of approach would undermine the integrity of your research. What would you answer if somebody would ask you, would that undermine the integrity of your research?
Yeah.
To follow this pathway?
I think there's a misconception that there's research that is value neutral. That's not the case. Every research has values built in. And there's, we have 50 years of a discipline called science and technology studies that shows that even in lab studies, your values will influence how you study things and what comes out. So research is never value neutral. I prefer to be transparent and accountable for the values that I carry into my research. I prefer to be open about my positionality. And to be honest, when I applied for the ERC grant in 2017-18, I took a big gamble. There were 2 million euros on the table, so it was a big gamble. I wrote positionality very deeply into that application. I said, I'm going to side with patient organizations and access to medicines activists. I'm going to study markets from their perspective, not from the perspective of pharma industry, because you hear them all the time. They have a very loud voice. I want to amplify those voices that are not heard or not as much heard in that market. And so I went in with that, and there was a panel of 20 very accomplished academics and another 10 remote reviewers. So you're very thoroughly reviewed on these things, and they bought it, which for me was a really important sign, because it said that you can have very robust and trustworthy and credible research while opening up about your positionality and while opening up about the values that you're carrying into the research. Actually, it will improve your research quality at the end of the day.
And of course, if you think through it from the beginning, I suppose it helps you also with the ethics side of it.
Exactly.
To really round it off and understand the implications of it. Because if you don't have the positionality, you wouldn't know about the research ethics, would you? Yeah. Okay, super. And I suppose one last question is, what is next after having all these wonderful accomplishments? What's next for Professor Susi Geiger?
So the first thing is the book launch on the 11th of December, and we're going to have an event here in UCD on the 19th of January as part of the Lawrence Crowley Lecture, where the book is officially launched, and then we take it on a little tour, because you have to. And the book is called Peak Pharma, Towards a New Political Economy of Health. And it really, it says what it says on a tin kind of thing. So pharma industry will not like it too much, but I'll have some very interesting, very robust conversations with them on the basis of that book, I think. After that, I've gained over the years a little bit of a science policy hobby. Now, science policy is not something that a lot of people are passionate about, but what I realized through misfires and through just involvement with the European Research Council, that so much of our society depends on fundamental research. Fundamental research budgets are very much threatened at the moment. There is a very strong mandate in the EU and elsewhere to move these budgets towards applied research, innovation-ready research, and that's all great, we need that too. But if we don't have that influx of fundamental research, we're going to be in trouble at some point as a society, especially as a society who's going through so many very radical changes. We need fundamental research in really all disciplines to come to grips with those. So that's why I was delighted when I got appointed as the ERC Ambassador to Ireland, and I'm interacting in that kind of sphere quite a bit at the moment. So that's definitely going to continue. The work on the WHO Technical Advisory Group is going to continue, and you never know, there might be another big research application somewhere, research grant application somewhere along the horizon. There's enough to research in that sphere of pharmaceutical markets anyway.
Well, and given your past trajectory, I'm sure you'll be hugely successful going forward. So thank you so much for the lovely chat. And I would love to open the floor up for any questions that you might have for Susi.
Susi, thank you and congratulations. For the early career scholars in the room, and especially the PhD students, can you talk concretely about how they express their positionality? Because they have fears that they will be seen as subjective, that their work won't be taken seriously, or that they won't be positioned well in terms of the journals to which they submit. So have you seen a warming up of journals to this? And how do you avoid a kind of Joya-like template of positionality and really get that sort of authenticity across?
Thank you, Anne. That's a really, really great question. And it is a struggle, especially for mainstream journals. But I'll give you an example. I reviewed a paper for Journal of Management Studies earlier this week, and it was on a very sensitive topic, and they didn't disclose their positionality. They actually didn't mention ethics at all, which was a choice I wouldn't have made. But they also didn't talk about how they approached and from what standpoint they approached this very sensitive topic. And that didn't sit well with me as a reviewer, and that didn't sit well with the associate editor either. So, and Journal of Management Study is a mainstream, very well-reputed journal. So I think it's filtered through in a lot of circles that if you engage in research, it's important to be transparent about your values. Now, that doesn't have to go into sort of, confessional terms, but where it's appropriate and to the level that it is appropriate. In that case, it would have been not just appropriate, but necessary for the authors to tell us a little bit more about how they approached the topic. I think editors understand that now. So I think for the early career researchers, my advice would be think about to what extent you need to declare these things. And the more sensitive your topic is, the more it's important that you flag that. It's just, for me, it's just transparency. How we approach the research, we write these beautiful method sections, right? And explain the smallest little detail about our data analysis, etc. But then we don't mention ourselves in there, And again, it doesn't have to be long, but a sentence or two. Yeah, I think it's good.
Susi, something that certainly struck me in the conversation was your very, very strong emphasis on impact. And I think this is something that a lot of scholars struggle with a little bit early on in their career, where perhaps the focus is very much on just getting a publication. So the focus is on the output rather than the outcome or the impact. Could you just tell us a little bit about your impact journey? I mean, you're at the stage now where obviously, extremely established international reputation, so you can afford to engage in perhaps slightly riskier research than maybe someone who's earlier on in their career. But nonetheless, you didn't get to where you are now in one jump. So I just wonder what advice you could give to earlier career scholars who are perhaps at an earlier stage on that impact journey.
Yeah. Again, really good question, Tony. Thank you. you don't have to influence high-level policy straight off. And you probably won't be, because these are networks that are built over a very long time. But I think there's really easy wins that we can all make with our on our impact journey, so to speak. So when you have a publication, and when that publication is in an area that is economically or societally or in other ways potentially impactful, then it actually doesn't take that much effort to write a piece for the conversation. Or the UCD Geary Institute has a website called publicpolicy.ie, where it's 1,500 words, so you can just bring that publication down to an understandable public engagement piece that you can publish in various different outlets. There's more and more outlets like that, like The Conversation, like publicpolicy.ie, that people can access very easily. And it just means that you're making your research results available, because, we all know about paywalls and how much of a pain they are. And we all know that we tend to love to hide behind esoteric language a lot of the time. And it took me really quite a lot of effort to unhide myself and to gain voice, and to start writing these pieces. But now we do that pretty much as a matter of course for every publication that matters, which hopefully most of our publications are. We write a companion piece for the conversation mostly, or for publicpolicy.ie, etc. And then you can go on to LinkedIn and use social media as well. So I think it's part of our jobs now more and more, and it's being measured more and more also for early career researchers. And it doesn't mean that you don't publish your really meaty journal publications. That's, again, I'm not naive, that's still important, but it just means that after the publication, after you got that, that email that you get, congratulations, your publication is accepted, go and have your glass of bubbly or whatever, and then maybe sit down and think, if I just invest a day or two, can I make this accessible?
Any other questions?
Hi, Susie. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your interdisciplinary journey as well? Because you certainly walked across the great divide between business and law, among other things.
Yeah. For my sins,
and the challenges and
never
rewards.
thought. Thank you, Amanda. Out of our law school here, never thought I would go into any legal scholarship whatsoever. And now I've published in law journals, actually. Yeah, I suffer from an incurable case of curiosity, which means that I get intellectually bored quite quickly of one area, and that's not good. That's not a good thing for an academic career most of the time, because a lot of the time, you go deep and you get famous for one thing and you repeat that one thing and people will cite you for that one thing, and before you know it, you have 15,000 sites on Google Scholar, and that's great. I'm not that person. I'm intellectually, can I say promiscuous even? I like to draw from different disciplines when these become relevant. When you work on a heavily regulated area, such as pharmaceutical markets, for instance, you have to understand regulation. When you work on markets full stop, you have to understand economic sociology. So these are areas, when you work on digital health, you have to understand science and technology studies. Doesn't mean that I have to become a bona fide scholar in these areas, but I have to be conversant with them. And that's been something that's been hugely enjoyable, sometimes very tricky, patent law being one of these areas. but also something that I built into misfires from the start. So, you know, in the office in Q109, looking at Ilaria and Angali here, there were scholars from 6 different disciplines sitting in the office. You know, Ilaria is moral philosophy. Angali joined us as a medical anthropologist. We had an economic sociologist. We had business scholar. And there were conversations in the room, which was lovely. It didn't make the publication journey necessarily much easier, because journals like to know what you're doing. You know, there is still not a lot of opening for truly interdisciplinary research in journals. And that's something that certainly, you know, I'm on a few editorial boards that I'm pushing for very strongly in the journals that I'm involved with.
So just building on that interdisciplinarity, because obviously you mentioned there's tensions in terms of trying to get publications afterwards, but I assume that interdisciplinarity was a key part of getting the funding.
Yes and no. Funders are funny in that they also like to know sort of what box to pack you into. But then the European Research Council, for instance, the panels are interdisciplinary. So your project has to talk to various different disciplines in the room. Again, you know, depending on the panel, there's different sort of constellations of disciplines. But I just think it also makes for different scholarship. Sometimes I'm surprised at how advanced one discipline is with insights that another discipline finds revolutionary. And I'm kind of going, but these people over there have done this for 20 years. Why don't we, you know? So I don't understand it myself, why we don't talk more. And yeah, I mean, I read across probably 20 different journals most weeks.
Because I was going to ask, how do you manage?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my publication profile, again, not something that I would recommend for early career researchers, but I think once you're more established, you have that luxury of publishing more broadly. And yeah, it's the scenic route to academic careers, but you also see a lot on that scenic route.
Thank you.
Thank you. Warm congratulations, Susie. And just building maybe upon 2 of the issues in terms of the joys and challenges of interdisciplinary research and what Tony mentioned in terms of impact. Can you share maybe for the benefit of our early career scholars, some of the joys and challenges of collaborating with colleagues at European level, and in that context then seeking to influence European policy? Thank you.
Yeah. Great question, Jared. Thank you. And thanks for the congratulations as well. And you're someone who's traveled part of this journey actually with me. You've also worked interdisciplinarily for a very long time. And we were sort of crossing paths in various different projects over time. It's, I think, when you walk this path, you're dependent on 2 things. First of all, you're dependent on still identifying what you bring to the table in interdisciplinary collaborations. You have to be readable to people in that sense, but you also have to be able to rely on their deep subject expertise. So it's really, it's a collaboration amongst equals a lot of the time, where each have their own sort of point of origin, their own perspective, and then making these perspectives gel. I mean, probably like you, I've spent many a day locked into a meeting room, 8 hours nonstop, trying to just come up with a definition that everybody can actually subscribe to, you know, because we were preparing a European research grant or something. And that for instance, has been challenging, or at a very sort of basic pragmatic level, when I write with public health scholars, I always go, I don't know how to write an article that doesn't have a conceptual framework section or lit review section, because they push all their lit review into the intro, and that just explodes my head. But, you learn these things over time, and you learn to also appreciate other people's deep subject knowledge. And I think, the second part of your question, influencing European policy, is, I feel for policymakers, it wouldn't be the job that I would be cut out for, not a very diplomatic person at times, but they need that breadth. They need input from various different disciplines, and they can't have 10 people sitting in front of them advising them with different voices. So if you find a platform through which you can work with other people and collaborate, and then together come up with something that policymakers can take and can translate into policy, I think that's the most powerful. I've just worked with someone on a sort of a moonshot project that's also put in front of the European Commission now. And they've done that quite neatly on sort of 8 pages. They've had probably 20 experts from various different disciplines consulting on this moonshot paper, and they've pulled it together into 10 pages, and that is something that goes to policy, and that can inform policy, because they know the disciplines that have been involved but they don't have to sort of consult them all. Now I'm getting nervous.
You should.
Yeah.
In the past 6-7 years, 5, 7, whatever, were there points where you felt that some of the work personally challenged you, that you felt, that you needed resilience, so you needed to overcome some personal challenges? And of course you may choose how much detail to say, but if you want to say what were those points and what helped you overcome those obstacles or speed bumps and go back to thriving.
I'm going to start with the very practical level, and then I'm going to go into more personal things. At the very practical level, when you run a big research project, I always compare it to running a startup, but running a startup in a really big bureaucratic organization, which means you have all the responsibility of a startup and none of the flexibility, because you have HR and finance, and you have to interface with so many things. So starting misfires for me was just a massive learning curve in, literally sort of a quick fire learning curve in management, HR, finance, all of these areas. So that was interesting. Learned a lot about UCD as I went along. But that wasn't sort of personally challenging. In the space that my research sits, which is a lot of the time with organizations that have people who are very ill, who might be dying, who live with really horrific, debilitating illnesses, and who have difficulties, for instance, accessing medicines for these illnesses or healthcare services, etc. That can be personally challenging. So I give you one little example, and again, Angali was there with me. We had, as part of our benefit sharing plan, we went back to Kenya, Angali and myself, and we visited, we had policy engagements, which were great, but we also visited all the organizations that Angali had previously visited for interviews and focus groups. So we toured the country, the west of Kenya especially, and we were sitting in a small, you know what I'm talking about now, yeah. We were sitting in a small shack, wooden shack, with an organization that looks after people who have HIV, who are prostitutes, street workers. And at the very border with Uganda, and it was the week where Uganda had passed a new law that cracked down very extremely on LGBTQ rights. And the fear voiced in this organization was that there was a big demonstration planned in Uganda, a pro sort of right wing, you know, against anti-LGBTQ demonstration orchestrated by far right powers. And the fear in this organization that they voiced was that this demonstration would come across the border. And they were sitting, they had asked their funder for additional security because they felt so unsafe that week. And the funder couldn't provide that. So they were sitting in this wooden shack, and, you know, one match would have sufficed to sort of blow it all up. And that was a situation that, you know, we had such a beautiful benefit sharing plan, but like nothing that we could add to this organization would have really helped them. The only thing that we then decided to do was to sort of make a big thing on social media about our visit there and take lots of photos and post them everywhere we could. You know, it added a tiny layer of protection. Now, I'm not saying, you know, it saved the organization and in the end nothing happened, but just to signal to the outside world, there's, you know, this is an organization that is being seen, you know. So you can't just sort of erase it. You can't just blow it up, literally. But it was, I mean, yeah, it was challenging to sit there, to listen to the people, to try to understand what we can do to help them, and realizing there's not much we can do, actually, beyond the tiniest little thing which we then did, you know.
Thank you. Does anybody maybe have a final question, or everybody happy enough? No? Well, I think we might finish this off with a huge round of applause for Susi and all of it. Thank you.